Hello, my friend. Welcome to Dreamy Nights. It is a gentle thing that the night has brought this moment, and that rest is so close. Tonight, a soft story waits, a story made of rainlight, of old paper, of slow lamplight breathing in the dark. Let the day loosen its hold, let the thoughts soften at the edges, and let this quiet place become the only place. Take a slow breath, as if collecting the evening into the chest, and let it go, as if releasing everything that does not belong tonight. When the heart is ready to wander, the story begins like a door quietly opening beneath the rain. Rain had been falling for a long time, not in torrents, not in haste, only in that patient silver way that belongs to late evenings when the world has already decided to grow quiet. Each drop met the worn stones of a hidden courtyard and shimmered there, sliding inward toward the drains, leaving faint rivers of moonlit water. The air was cool and damp, perfumed with rain on old stone, rain on ivy, rain on wood that had survived many seasons. In the middle of this secret courtyard stood an archway of pale time-smoothed stone. Vines curled around it in lazy spirals, their leaves glistening in the wet. Beneath the arch was a door of dark oak, tall, heavy, and dignified. Its surface carved with patterns of leaves, stars, and small open books. The rain did not touch the door. It fell all around it, drumming on the stones, dripping from the overhang, but a thin, invisible shelter seemed to keep the wood warm and dry, as though the building itself protected its entrance. From the street outside, the place looked like nothing at all. An old wall, a narrow lane, a city almost asleep. But inside, beyond that carved door, was a world that had been gathering quiet for centuries. A soft lantern hung to the left of the arch, its glass misted by the damp. The flame inside was steady golden, casting a gentle circle of light on the wet stone. It gave the courtyard a center, a place the eye could rest. The sound of rain, the scent of wet ivy, the glow of that lamp, together they made the courtyard feel less like a place in the world and more like a threshold between waking and dream. Just beneath the arch, a key waited. It was not a key anyone had to search for. It was simply there on a little iron hook, as though the library trusted whoever arrived in the rain. The key was brass, warm in color, though the night was cool, and its edges had been smoothed by many hands. Taking it into a palm would feel satisfying, the weight of something made to last. The faint metallic scent mingling with rain. When the key slid into the dark oak door, it turned without resistance. There was a soft internal click, not loud, not echoing, just a polite acknowledgement from an old mechanism. The door opened inward on well-oiled hinges. No creak, no protest, only a quiet parting, as if the building had expected this arrival. Warmth, met the cool air. Not heat, but warmth in the form of light, a deep amber glow that came from many small sources rather than a single flame. The smell changed too. Outside, it had been rain and stone. Inside it became book leather, beeswax, polished floors, a hint of cedar. It was the scent of kept things, the scent of a place that remembers. Just inside the threshold lay a ridged mat of woven fibers placed carefully to receive the rain. Beyond it stretched a long, dimly lit foyer, floorboards dark with age and love. The walls were lined with carved panels, and on each panel, in subtle relief, were scenes of reading a child beneath a tree, an elder by a window, travelers in a circle, a scholar by candlelight. Stories even on the walls. The building wore its purpose in every detail. The rain did not stop at the door, its sound followed. Through the thick walls it became softer, smaller, like fingers tapping glass far away. It was as if the rain wanted to remain part of the story, so the library let it, but at a volume fit for rest. Further in the foyer opened to the first great hall. The hall was long and impossibly tall, its ceiling lost to shadows high above. Pillars of dark wood rose like tree trunks, and between them, tall shelves held books in ranks and gentle rows. Not crowded, not chaotic, ordered. Each shelf carried its own glimmer of brass labels, its own curve of polished edges. Overhead, from iron brackets, hung glass-shaded lamps that shed pools of honeyed light downward, leaving the upper reaches in dusky mystery. Dust motes floated in that light, moving slowly, drifting, as if time inside the library moved at a different speed. It was a kind of Undor starlight, small, tender, easy to follow with drowsy eyes. At intervals along the hall stood round side tables of walnut, each with a little arrangement. A short stack of books, a small vase with a single green branch, a candle in a glass chimney halfway melted. These details made the vast room feel human, made it clear this was not merely an archive, but a sanctuary, a place made for hands, for eyes, for minds that needed gentleness. The soundscape was layered, but so soft, it almost blended into one note. There was the rain patient and even. There was the faint ticking of a clock somewhere unseen, marking not urgency, but presence, a heartbeat for the hall. There was a rustle, not of bodies moving, but of pages that remembered being turned. And beneath everything, that velvety silence that old buildings have a silence that has absorbed laughter, whispers, footsteps for generations. A long runner of woven carpet extended down the center of the hall, its pattern a faded tapestry of vines and constellations. Footsteps on it would be nearly silent, barely more than a whisper against wool. This was a room that wanted quiet and gave quiet in return. At the far end of the hall, an alcove housed a large window. Its panes were tall and narrow, framed in dark wood, and outside it, the rain streaked downward in thin silvery lines. The glass glowed faintly blue from the night beyond, and where the raindrops gathered at the bottom of the pane, they formed tiny beads that caught the interior light like gems. The window was a reminder. There is weather and there is shelter. There is outside and there is within. The library, even here at its entrance, felt alive. Not in a way of movement or sound, but in awareness. It was a place that listened. A place that had witnessed people enter from storms of all kinds, weather, sorrow, fatigue, and had offered the same answer each time. Come in, breathe, slower, stay a while. To the right of the hall was a smaller room, almost hidden, where a narrow counter held an oil lamp and a leather-bound ledger. The light from the lamp made a soft golden oval on the counter, illuminating the edges of the book and a bowl of smooth river stones. The stones were warm from the lamp's nearness, their surfaces glossy. It was as though visitors once signed their names and placed a stone, but no signatures were needed now. The library knew. The ceiling of the main hall had a secret between the beams. Small cutouts allowed threads of moonlight to enter. They did not make the room bright. They only laid pale streaks of silver beside the amber of lamps, so that the whole space was a dialogue of warm and cool candle and moon, inside and sky. This gentle contrast is what made the air feel layered, dreamy deep. As the hall receded into the building, the shelves began to change. Near the entrance, the books were neatly bound in cloth and leather, familiar tones of brown burgundy, dark green. But further in the bindings became stranger indigo with silver stars. Vellum tied with ribbons, rolled scrolls in cubbies, boxes with painted lids. This hinted at the heart of the library where forgotten tales slept. But for now, on this first night, the library wanted only to welcome. Near the base of one of the tall shelves, an old wooden chair had been placed. Its back was high and gently curved its arms, smoothed by many hands. A folded blanket lay across it, woolen soft, the color of dried lavender. The blanket carried the faintest scent of sun-dried cotton and cedar chest. The chair was angled in such a way that anyone who sat there would have their gaze naturally drawn to the rainlit window. It was an invitation to stillness in furniture form. The floor beneath the chair was polished, reflecting the lamplight in smudged circles. The lamp itself, on a stand nearby, had a glass chimney etched with leaf patterns. When the flame moved, The leaves drifted across the walls in shadows like slow water. Through all of this, the rain continued, gentle, unwavering, like soft fingers on the roof. It did not intrude. It settled everything. It filled the small spaces between thoughts. In such a place, time did not disappear. It simply loosened. Minutes no longer marched. They reclined. The library carried centuries without hurry, so a single evening could stretch and soften inside it without strain. To anyone who entered, the feeling would have been immediate. This is a house of patience. There was too a quiet understanding woven through the air that stories here were not to be devoured but to be rested beside. That some books were meant to be opened slowly, perhaps not even read fully, only held so that their weight and age could be felt. That remembering and forgetting were siblings, not opposites, and that forgotten tales were not lost, but simply sleeping, waiting for nights like this. Outside, the rain darkened the city roofs, wrapped the lanes, hummed on shutters. Inside, lamplight breathed pages waited. The air smelled of preservation. And somewhere deeper beyond the visible shelves, the true heart of the library pulsed quietly. A promise of rooms, yet unseen, of manuscripts that murmured of windows that opened to rainlit gardens. But the night did not rush toward them. It began here in the first hall, with the slow arrival, with the door beneath the rain, with the sense of being received by a place that held forgotten things tenderly. The library settled. The rain continued. The night deepened like ink. The library did not reveal everything at once. It unfurled itself gradually, like pages turned by an invisible hand, each hallway offering a slightly deeper hush than the one before. After the first welcome, the rain-softened entrance, the golden lamps, the lavender blanket on the chair, the building seemed to suggest a slow wandering inward. Not a search, not an errand, only a drift. Beyond the first great hall, the floor narrowed into a long gallery. The runner continued its woven pattern of vines and constellations, now softened by time. Along the sides, the wood panels rose again, darker here, as though the light visited this part of the library less often. The lamps were spaced farther apart, so that light and shadow took turns. A pool of amber glow, then a quiet dusk, then amber again. The eye could rest in any of them. The soundscape shifted slightly. The rain, once distant, was now joined by a fainter sound. The almost imperceptible brush of air moving through high vents, carrying with it the cool, dry breath that kept the books safe. It smelled of linen, of old ink, of the paper that had grown mellow with age. Every breath taken here would pass through centuries. On the left, a carved arch announced the beginning of a remarkable room. Above it, In gilded letters worn soft were the words, "Shelves of Silence." Not the silence of emptiness, but the silence of contained story, the quiet that surrounds something precious. Inside the room was tall and oval like the inside of a lantern. Its walls were made entirely of shelves, rising in graceful tiers toward a ceiling painted with faint constellations. Each shelf was perfectly even, the books aligned not militarily, but lovingly, straight enough to show care, relaxed enough to show they were often visited. The floor here was not plank, but parquet in warm, honeyed wood, polished to a low sheen. The reflections of the lamps moved on it slowly like shallow water. This was a room of slumbering pages. Not a single book in this chamber seemed restless. None leaned crooked. None sagged. They looked as though they were resting in deep, contented sleep, trusting that whenever they were needed, gentle hands would lift them. Some bore small satin ribbons tucked between pages. Others had linen ties. Others were housed in slipcases. There were scrolls too resting in cubbyholes, their ends sealed with soft wax in muted colors. Sage green, dusty rose amber. The air in this room had a particular temperature, cool enough to preserve, warm enough to comfort. It felt the way it feels to open a wooden chest in winter and find everything inside still holding summer. The smell was fuller here, leather beeswax, the faint sweetness of rag paper. Somewhere, an oil lamp burned with a barely audible purr. Placed at perfect intervals were little stools and ladder chairs, each with broad rungs meant to be kind to the soles of the feet. The wood was rubbed smooth from use. If anyone had run a hand along the ladder, they would have felt grooves and softened edges, traces of many evenings of quiet seeking. In the center of the room stood a circular table. It was wide, with a low rim to keep precious things from sliding, and on it lay 3 open books, not abandoned, displayed. Their pages were thick, almost velvety, the ink dark as if it had only just dried. One of them showed a careful illustration of a star chart, lines of gold connecting pale blue stars. Another contained a script of elegant looping letters in a language long retired. The third held a map unlike any map outside this building, not of lands but of stories, a diagram of how tales traveled from one age to another. A soft folded cloth rested beside the books. It was made of fine linen, its edges hemmed by hand. It was the kind of cloth used to brush away dust, to touch aging paper, without oils, to lift fragile spines without scratching. The presence of that cloth said as much about the library as the books did. This is a place that cares. Somewhere above, rain tapped again lightly, more distant, reminding all that outside the night continued. But in here time, settled lower to the ground. The room seemed to breathe with a rhythm that matched sleep. There was nothing sharp, nothing jarring. Even the titles on the spines whispered. Many were in soft tones. Chronicles of Gentle Seas, The Atlas of Lost Stars, a compendium of dream weavers, letters never sent still kept. Others were unnamed, their spines blank, their stories recognizable only by those who had known them before. The blankness did not make them forgotten, only private. A narrow balcony circled the upper level, reached by a spiral stair of ironwood. The stair had steps wide enough for slow climbing, and its rail was wrapped in smooth leather where hands would most often pass. Up there, near the ceiling's painted constellations, the shelves held the most delicate manuscripts, the ones that preferred height and stillness. Even climbing the stair, the air would stay gentle, no drafts, no rattles, only a slightly drier scent like sun on linen. What made this room especially tender was its sound of pages not turning, but remembering turning. That almost echo. The way a page, after being opened and closed many times, retains a faint curve, and so makes a tiny sigh when rested again. The room held many such sighs. It was a lullaby made of paper. In the corner closest to the door stood a tall clock, its case of dark cherry wood polished to a soft gleam. Its face was simple brass hands, Roman numerals, and its pendulum swung with profound patience. The tick was so low, it was more like a pulse. Not a push forward in time, but a reassurance. The night is here, the books are safe. There is no hurry. A small, almost invisible door at the back of the room led to a narrower passage of shelves. This passage was lit only by wall sconces, their glass mottled, so the light came out dappled like sunlight through leaves. Here, the books were more eccentric. Some were wrapped in silk, some in rough canvas, some in parchment tied with braided string. The tags beneath them bore quiet labels: collected seasonal rains, childhood night winds, memories of inland harbors. These were not histories of empires or wars. These were histories of sensations. The library kept them because even such small things deserved remembering. In this narrow passage, the scent shifted again. Along with parchment was the faintest trace of lavender oil, perhaps from a satchel placed among the books to ward off insects, perhaps from a reader long ago who carried lavender in a pocket. Scents linger longer than voices. The library knew this, and so it let the fragrance stay. At a small built-in desk, lit by a shaded lamp, there rested a feather duster, not for sweeping floors, but for touching spines. Its feathers were soft gray, like the belly of a dove. Someone, sometime in the afternoon, had likely moved through this passage, lifting each volume with a tender sweep, keeping everything free from the finest dust. The gesture would have been slow, reverent. The room still remembered the motion. Past the shelves of silence, the gallery opened into another hall, this one broader and slightly brighter, thanks to two tall windows set high in the wall. Rain streaked down them as well, but the glass here was leaded into small diamond panes. The raindrops broke into smaller glimmering beads, so the light that came through scattered in delicate patterns on the opposite wall. It made the hall feel like underwater morning, muted but sparkling. This second hall was where the library began to show its more imaginative collections. Niche displays held peculiar artifacts. A sealed glass dome containing a dried sea fern beside a book of ocean songs. A brass astrolabe paired with a volume on celestial myths. A drawer left slightly open to reveal rolled letters tied with gold thread. None of these were flashy. Each was quiet but infused with story. On one pedestal was a book the color of burnished copper, its title pressed in a language of spirals. The leather had fine cracks like the surface of autumn leaves. Touching it would have revealed warmth, as if it held stored sunlight. Another shelf displayed a line of slim, tall books, bound in midnight blue, each stamped with a single silver star. Perhaps travelogues of the night sky, perhaps records of dreams. As the hall deepened, the rain softened again, smoothed by layers of wall and wood. What rose to prominence now was the faint rustle of lamps, the nearly inaudible murmur of flame shifting in glass. And beneath that, the low old house sound of timber settling, a living building breathing. What was most striking here was the absence of urgency. No book cried out to be read first. No hallway insisted on being explored. Everything waited in still priority. A reader, if one had been present, could have spent the entire night in just one corner, studying the grain of wood following the motion of rain on glass, tracing letters on a single spine. And the library would have said, "That is enough." In this way, the hall of slumbering pages was not only a place to find stories, but a place to remember how to move slowly. It retaught the body the pace of candlelight, steady, warm, unhurried. It reminded the mind that silence is also a kind of knowledge. It allowed the heart to rest beside unnamed things without needing to open them. Beyond, somewhere deeper, lay the chosen manuscripts, the whispered excerpts, the rainlit window with its candle, the archivist's desk. But the night, still young and velvety, asked for lingering for a long gaze, up at the tiers of shelves, for a quiet moment, watching dust drift in lamplight, for listening to rain, find glass again and again. The library held its breath with the storm. The pages slept. The lamps glowed. The night settled even further into itself. The further one drifted into the library, the quieter the world became. The rain outside softened to a distant lull, still present, still steady, but now as gentle as memory. Each drop, each rhythm seemed absorbed by the walls until even the sound of time itself began to move like breath. The deeper rooms were hushed in a different way, not in emptiness, but in attention, as though the air listened. At the end of a long corridor stood a narrow door of pale wood. It had no sign, no inscription, only a single brass handle that shone faintly in the lamplight. Beyond it was a chamber smaller than the great halls, but warmer, more intimate. It felt as though this was not a room meant to be discovered, but one that revealed itself when the night had become still enough. Inside a low table, waited surrounded by tall shelves, bowed slightly under the weight of old volumes. Each shelf carried its own little world, handwritten manuscripts, bound with silk notebooks of faded ink, fragments of letters. The ceiling sloped gently downward, meeting the shelves like protective arms. A single lamp, shaded in frosted glass, burned steadily above the table. Its glow was pale gold, with the faint shimmer of rainlight seeping in through a narrow window near the floor. On the table rested one open book. It was large, the color of dried parchment, with a binding softened by touch. The edges of its pages had grown slightly uneven with time, and the ink had taken on that dusky sheen only found in manuscripts written by candlelight. The book was not new, but neither was it forgotten. It was in that sacred space between a place where things continue to live, even if seldom seen. The lamp's light caught the lettering, illuminating a language of slow curls and elegant ascenders. The words themselves seemed to hum softly, even though no one spoke them. They felt alive, as though waiting to be read aloud once more to be remembered. And then, as it sometimes happens in places that hold memory, the air shifted. The room did not change, but something within it stirred subtle as a sigh. The lamplight shimmered once, twice, and the faintest whisper rose from the open book. It was not a voice, but the echo of one. It spoke gently, a melody more than words, a rhythm that touched the space like falling leaves. The story it carried was not grand, not long. It was the kind of tale that exists between waking and sleep, meant only to be felt. It told of a night when the stars fell softly into the sea and the water carried their light like floating petals, of travelers who walked by moonlight, not to arrive, but to listen, of a single candle on a windowsill that never burned out, because its flame was fed by memory instead of wax. The whisper faded, but its warmth lingered like the trace of a dream one cannot quite recall, but knows was kind. The pages shifted slightly. releasing a faint, dry fragrance dust cedar and the sweetness of ink. The scent mingled with the steady perfume of rain, creating something new, like time itself becoming fragrant. In the quiet that followed, the library seemed to breathe again this time, slower, deeper. The whisper had not disturbed it. Rather, it had become part of its silence. The book rested open and calm, its story folded once more into the stillness. Across from the table, a small writing desk waited, simple but beautifully made. On its surface lay a sheet of thick paper blank, except for a single pressed leaf at its corner, a leaf that had once been gold, now turned soft brown with age. Beside it, an inkwell glimmered faintly. Its glass clouded its contents dark. A quill lay across the edge, fine, white, weightless. It looked as though it had just been placed down after writing something the room remembered. A chair sat before the desk, carved from maple, its cushion pale linen embroidered with delicate vines. The seat was slightly indented the way fabric becomes after many years of welcome. Whoever once wrote here had likely stayed for long hours, accompanied by rain, by lamplight, by silence. The window behind the desk was small, but it offered a view unlike any other. It was set low enough to see the base of the courtyard's trees where rain gathered in dark puddles. Occasionally, a droplet from a leaf above would fall, widening the circles on the surface. Each ripple reflected a piece of the lamplight, so that for a few moments the world outside looked like liquid gold. The longer the gaze lingered, the less it mattered. What was real? The lamp, the rain, the reflection, the pale, the whisper, all began to blend. The library did not demand distinction. It allowed everything to coexist, folded gently into one another. A movement of air stirred a page near the open book, turning it slightly. The thin sound it made, the soft slip of parchment against parchment, was like the exhale of an old story sighing in its sleep. Dust motes swirled briefly in the light, each one glinting before vanishing back into stillness. Near the far corner of the room stood a wooden cabinet with glass doors. Inside, behind the faint reflection of the lamp rows of slim journals, stood aligned. Some had small paper tags attached to their spines, written in a careful hand. Whispers of the West Wing, letters from the silent sea, dreams, recorded on rainy evenings. Their titles were as gentle as the rain outside, as if they were never meant to be read loudly. Beneath the cabinet lay a drawer slightly ajar. Through the small gap, one could see the corner of a folded sheet, its edge yellowed. A fragment of a line could just be made out, written in faded ink. The moment the rain began, time forgot its name. The rest was hidden, protected by the wood and the silence. Above the ceiling was low, curved like the inside of a dome, painted in a pattern of faint vines. The paint had faded in places, leaving patches of soft ivory where once there had been green. Yet even the fading felt intentional, as if the ceiling was teaching the art of impermanence. In this library, even what vanished left behind grace. Somewhere nearby, perhaps through a vent or an open corridor, came the faintest hint of music. Not a melody, but a pattern of tones so gentle it could have been mistaken for the movement of rain through pipes. It lingered, harmonizing with the silence like the heartbeat of the building itself. Time did not so much pass here as rest. In the slowness, the rain deepened in tone, a slightly heavier rhythm, as though the clouds had settled closer to the earth. Its sound resonated faintly through the walls, blending with the soft flutter of the lamp flame. The two together became something like breathing. The book on the table remained open to the whispered page, as though aware that silence too could be a form of reading. The air thickened slightly with calm, that particular calm that comes only when nothing more is expected to happen, and yet everything feels complete. The library in this moment was entirely still. The rain fell, the lamp glowed, and the stories, all of them slept in their bindings, safe and timeless. And in that vast quiet, where pages and rain shared the same rhythm, something unspoken filled the space. A sense that every unread dream was still alive, still waiting, still glowing softly in the dark, even if no one ever turned the page. The whisper of unread dreams faded back into silence. The lamp's glow steadied. The rain returned to its patient cadence. The library exhaled. The library changed, not by movement, but by deepening. Its silence became warmer, its light more tender, as though each minute that passed was drawing the night inward, closer to the heart. The rain outside continued its steady rhythm, the same since evening, yet it sounded softer now, more like a lullaby written for the walls themselves. The air carried a cool freshness through unseen vents, mixing with the faint scent of cedar and ink. It was the smell of pages resting. Past the chamber of whispered dreams, a wide archway opened into another hall. Here, the ceiling lifted again, and the lamplight spread in broader pools, honeyed and calm. The air was neither too bright nor too dim. It shimmered at the edge of visibility like candlelight through fog. This was a place of pause, a sanctuary within a sanctuary. In the center stood a wide reading table, its surface worn to a soft gleam by countless careful hands. Its edges were rounded, its corners smooth. Upon it lay a handful of books, some closed, some slightly ajar, and beside them a porcelain teapot on a wooden tray. Steam drifted from its spout, curling lazily into the air. The scent of jasmine tea joined the fragrance of old paper and rain, weaving together in a quiet harmony that spoke of comfort. A pair of cups rested nearby, one white one glazed in pale grey. Both were empty, yet faint rings inside revealed their history. Whoever had once sat here had taken their time sipping slowly, perhaps reading by lamplight, perhaps only thinking. The moment still lingered, captured in the tea's ghostly aroma. At the far side of the room, tall windows faced the rain. Beyond the glass, droplets shimmered like strings of pearls. The garden outside was shadowed but alive. Leaves glistened. The earth breathed steam. And somewhere, a gutter hummed faintly, carrying the rainfall away in slow, liquid song. Occasionally, a gust of wind stirred the ivy along the wall, shaking droplets loose in soft cascades. A small sitting area waited near those windows. Two armchairs upholstered in velvet, a low round table between them, and a woven rug beneath that carried the faintest trace of rose and smoke. On the table burned a short candle, its flame gentle and still. Its wax pooled into soft ridges. The candle's light reflected in the window, so that from inside it appeared there were two flames, one in this world and one mirrored in the rain-dark glass. This was the library's heart, not its oldest, not its grandest, but its warmest. It was the kind of space that gathered all quiet things and let them rest together. The air here held no expectation, no echo of footsteps or voices, only the pulse of tranquility itself. At the base of one window sat a woven basket filled with folded wool blankets. The nearest was draped over the arm of the chair, soft and textured, the color of ash and linen. Beneath it, another was embroidered with faint golden threads, catching light only when the candle flickered. The woven scent of fabric and faint cedar mingled with the air, making the space feel lived in, yet eternal. The librarian, or perhaps the spirit of the place, had arranged everything so that comfort and care were inseparable. The books here were chosen differently from those in the halls of memory or silence. Their spines were simpler, often cloth-bound, sometimes without title at all. These were not the books that needed to be found. They were the ones that waited to be held. A few rested open, revealing pages of gentle ink drawings, sketches of seashells, constellations, feathers, pressed flowers. One bore a handwritten note between its pages, almost faded to invisibility. For evenings, when the rain forgets to stop, the handwriting was delicate, curling slightly upward as if smiling. At the back of the room, nestled between the bookshelves, stood a small fireplace. Its fire burned low, not bright only, a pale ember glow that flickered between wood and shadow. The sound it made was soft A sigh, a faint pop, a tiny rhythm beneath the rain. It filled the silence, not with noise, but with depth. The warmth spread slowly across the floorboards, reaching the rug, the armchairs, the table. It was the kind of warmth that didn't just touch the skin, but reminded the heart of gentler hours, evenings, by lamplight, long talks without words, the feeling of belonging somewhere safe. On the mantel, above the hearth, rested a small collection of objects, a brass clock that ticked once every 2 seconds, its sound measured and low, a cluster of dried lavender tied with twine, a photograph faded to sepia depicting a garden path bordered by wisteria, and a single seashell polished to silver by time. None of these things were extraordinary, but together they were enough to make the space whole. Light from the lamp and the fire merged into one amber current flowing across the room like liquid dusk. Dust motes rose and fell slowly in it, glimmering, vanishing. Each carried the impression of calm, small, weightless, unconcerned. In one corner, an upright piano stood half hidden behind a folding screen of wood and rice paper. Its lid was closed, but a few sheets of music rested on top, their edges curled. The notes were handwritten, their ink faded. A title could just be made out, Etude for Rain and Lanterns. The pages looked untouched for years, yet somehow they still hummed faintly as though remembering their melody. The piano's wood, blackened with age, reflected the room's light in muted ripples. Dust along the keys made them shimmer softly white, and ivory blending like old moonlight. The air around it was still reverent waiting. Across from it, near the corner, a floor lamp cast its glow upward into a half dome of glass etched with vines. Its light stretched up the walls, catching the gilded edges of frames and the ridges of books. Everything it touched looked softer, nearer to dream. The lamp's gentle hum blended with the rhythm of rain, and the two sounds became indistinguishable, one continuous tone of peace. For a while, nothing moved. The tea cooled. The candle's flame wavered slightly, then steadied. A page somewhere in the room turned itself soundless, but sure, as if guided by the slow wind of sleep. The clock ticked, the rain whispered, and every element seemed to agree. Nothing more is needed. It was here in this serene center that the essence of the library revealed itself, not as a keeper of stories, but as a keeper of stillness. Its books were not demanding to be read. Its chairs were not waiting to be filled. Everything simply existed in harmony with the night. It was not a place one came to do anything, it was a place one came to be. The fire glowed lower. The room dimmed slightly, entering the hush of late hours. From the windows, the rain's reflection shimmered faintly against the glass. Somewhere in the distance, another clock answered the one on the mantel, a deeper tone, a lower pitch. Together, their ticks wove a slow duet of time. Above all, a profound peace seemed to wrap the library like a cloak, an embrace of serenity made of warmth and silence and light. The chair by the window remained empty, but its cushion held the shape of rest. The candle burned smaller, its wick bending inward, its pool of wax smooth and white. The air itself began to settle as if laying down for the night. The rain outside slowed. The fire sighed once more, and in that perfect stillness, the room and everything within it seemed to drift into a collective exhale. The rain had been falling for hours, yet within the library it felt newly born. Each time it touched the glass, each drop descended with purpose, clear as crystal tracing, patient silver lines across the tall panes of the great window. Outside, the world was awash in reflection. Dark stone, glimmered ivy leaves, bowed under beads of light, and the faint outline of a moon swam behind clouds like a lantern beneath deep water. Inside, all was still. The air held that tender quiet found only after midnight, a quiet thick enough to soften thought. The lamps along the walls had burned low, their light now the color of honey, almost golden amber flickering at the edges. The scent of the fireplace lingered, faint wood smoke and warmth, but the strongest note now came from the rain itself, clean, metallic, endlessly pure. The rain-lit window dominated the far wall. Its frame was dark oak, carved with slender vines that curled around its edges. At its base was a broad windowsill, deep enough to hold a person sitting sideways, knees drawn up, gazing outward. A small cushion rested there, faded by years of lamplight, still carrying the scent of linen and tea. Someone had once spent countless evenings here, reading, dreaming, or simply watching the rain trace its gentle alphabets against the glass. Tonight the cushion remained untouched, yet the air around it seemed expectant, as though the memory of that quiet presence still lingered. Light from a nearby candle trembled against the window, its glow mirrored and multiplied in every raindrop. The result was a living constellation, gold stars rippling over the glass, blooming and fading with each flicker of flame. On the small table beneath the window sat a collection of simple, beautiful objects. A ceramic vase holding 2 sprigs of lavender, a cup of tea cooling slowly to match the room's temperature, and a stack of letters tied with a gray ribbon. The letters had aged gracefully, corners, soft edges, feathered ink turned sepia. The ribbon looked like it had been untied and retied many times. Their existence felt personal, but not private, like whispered words overheard kindly by the room itself. The library's hum was delicate, just the low ticking of the clock, the faint sigh of settling wood, and the continuous patter of rain. Together, they formed a music older than melody, the sound of patient time. A soft breeze drifted through an unseen crack in the frame, carrying with it the cool freshness of the storm. The flame of the candle leaned slightly, and the scent of wax and lavender mingled with the scent of rain-soaked earth. The mingling of warmth and chill dryness and damp was what gave the air its richness. It felt like breathing in both comfort and renewal at once. At one corner of the glass, fogged lightly from the warmth inside meeting the cool outside. On that fogged patch, a single mark remained, the faint trace of a fingerprint smudged long ago. It was a small human thing amid so much stillness, a reminder that this vast, quiet world had once been touched. The fingerprint shimmered faintly as the candlelight passed through it, then faded into mist again. Near the base of the window stood a wooden chest, its lid half open. Inside were blankets folded carefully and a small collection of notebooks. Their covers were plain, bound in linen, the color of dusk. The topmost notebook had been left slightly ajar, and its first page carried a single line in neat handwriting: to write what the rain remembers. The ink had bled slightly where the paper once met damp fingers. Turning a page revealed sketches, rain puddles reflecting lamps, the outlines of leaves pressed against glass, the rough shadow of a book left open beside a candle. Each drawing was minimal, made of a few patient strokes. But together, they captured what words could not: the quiet conversation between the world outside and the world within. The candle's flame trembled again, this time stronger, as if stirred by something unseen. Not a wind, but the gentle pulse of the room's breath. Light rippled across the wooden floor, revealing its smooth grain and scattered patches of faint gold. The reflection moved with a rhythm that mirrored the rain itself. Fluid, continuous, never the same. The sound of the rain deepened briefly, as if the heavens poured a little more and then softened again into a murmur. In that ebb and flow, there was something familiar, something that resembled thought or memory, or the rhythm of a story being remembered. The library seemed to listen its silence, tuning itself to the weather's tone. Across from the window, a small shelf was built into the wall, holding just a few books. Their spines were simpler than the ornate volumes in the grand hall. Plain linen, no gilding, only handwritten titles. Evening reflections, the way of quiet places, rain songs. They looked well read. Their corners rounded their edges, faintly darkened by fingertips. They belonged not to scholars, but to dreamers. One of the books, slightly askew, had a thin ribbon marking a page. Its position suggested someone had been halfway through, perhaps years ago, and simply never needed to finish. Within these walls Not every story needed an ending. Some were meant to rest open, suspended like a single note, allowed to fade naturally into silence. The rain continued, drawing invisible paths down the glass. The sound grew rounder as it struck the sill hollow, melodic, comforting. Sometimes a droplet would pause mid-descent, merging with another, forming a perfect sphere of light before slipping down. Every few moments, lightning glowed faintly behind the clouds, illuminating the world outside in a brief, ghostly silver. No thunder followed, only that silent bloom of light. The momentary brightness revealed more of the garden, a narrow path winding away into trees, a small statue partly covered in moss, a bird bath overflowing with rainwater. Then the world fell back into its dim glow, and the candle, once again, became the brightest thing in view. In this rhythm, light, shadow, silence, sound, the room seemed to sway like breathing in slow motion, the library's heartbeat in time with the rain. Every drop that touched the glass carried away another fragment of the day, polishing the night clean. The candle burned lower still, its flame shrinking, but not fading. The cup of tea grew cold. The lavender in the vase released its final traces of scent, mixing with wax and rain. The letters on the table stayed tied, their secrets safe within ribbon and silence. It was a perfect kind of stillness, not empty but full. A stillness where everything belonged. Somewhere deeper in the library, a door clicked softly, not closing, not opening, just settling. The sound was so subtle, it might have been the building breathing. And outside, a brief breeze swept through the courtyard, carrying the scent of wet leaves and the faint metallic tinge of rain on stone. Within the room, light and sound and air folded together, becoming one continuous hush. The candle's reflection on the glass faded to a small golden ember, then to nothing. And in that moment, the window no longer seemed to separate inside from outside. It felt instead like a bridge, a veil between waking and dream. The rain fell. The night deepened. And the library, in its infinite patience, held both the sky's song and the soul's rest within one tender silence. The deeper one wandered into the library, the more the air began to resemble thought itself, quiet, weightless, full of invisible patterns. Every corner of the great building seemed to remember something, a page once turned, a sigh, once breathed a candle, once lit, and left to melt in silence. But near the heart of the library was a room unlike the others, smaller, humbler, and somehow more awake. The door to this room was half open, as though it had been left that way out of courtesy. Beyond it, the light was different, not the mellow amber of candles, but the warmer tone of a desk lamp, steady and constant. It illuminated a table made of deep walnut worn smooth, where hands had rested for many years. The The grain of the wood caught the light like slow-moving water, and faint rings of ink and tea still lingered on its surface, ghostly records of long hours spent in patient work. This was the archivist's table. The archivist was not present, and perhaps never had a single face. It felt as though the table itself was the archivist, the keeper of hands, of gestures of breath that had come and gone. Around it, the space carried the same feeling one finds in a letter written by someone kind: warmth, precision, and a quiet willingness to listen. Stacks of documents sat neatly aligned at the table's far edge. Parchment sheets, tied with thread notebooks, marked with ribbons, envelopes sealed in wax, the color of faded rose. Each was labeled in delicate handwriting. Some titles were practical: Restorations Volunathui, Chronicle of Shelves and Windows, but others read more like dreams, collected echoes, catalogue of forgotten smiles, index of unsent letters. A magnifying glass lay on its side, atop an open ledger, its brass handle reflecting the lamplight. Nearby, a fountain pen rested on a blotter stained in soft circles of ink. The pen's nib caught the light flashing gold, though no one lifted it. A porcelain cup sat beside the blotter, its contents long gone. But the faint scent of chamomile remained sweet and sleepy. There was no sound here but the whisper of the lamp's flame and the faint murmur of rain continuing its endless descent outside. The sound of rain through this room's thick windows had changed softer now, more rhythmic, as though it had adjusted its tempo to the calm of the table. Pinned to a corkboard above the desk were a few small scraps of paper, fragments of handwriting, faded sketches of floor plans, a pressed petal flattened like memory. One note read, "Preserve not perfection, but presence." Another, written in smaller script beneath it, said, "Every page deserves patience." These might have been reminders from a caretaker long gone, or perhaps from the library itself. On a lower shelf, beside the table boxes, were arranged neatly, each marked with a single letter, A through M. The first few were ajar, revealing contents both ordinary and mysterious. Bookmarks made of silk wax seals, with symbols of stars, fragments of maps. A few contained letters, written in different languages, yet all shared the same opening line: "To the one who remembers." The archivist's chair, carved of oak and cushioned in dark velvet, was pushed slightly away from the table, angled toward the window. It was as though someone had risen only moments ago, stepping quietly away to attend to something beyond the frame of sight. Yet, even in absence, the presence remained a stillness that was neither loneliness nor emptiness, but care. The window behind the table was small and circular, set high in the wall. Through it, the night sky could be seen in fragments, clouds, drifting, raindrops sliding, and occasionally a star appearing for a brief trembling moment before the mist covered it again. The glass was thick and slightly imperfect, bending the view so that the raindrops seemed to glide slower than in the world beyond. The faint reflection of the lamp's glow shimmered on that round pane, merging with the outside rainlight, until inside and outside were indistinguishable. It was the kind of view that could make a person forget the difference between looking outward and inward. On one corner of the table lay an unfinished catalogue entry written in careful script, volume unknown, title unread, whisper fragment, condition weathered, notes, subject matter believed to concern remembrance of rain fading of ink, endurance of silence. Keeper uncertain if complete. Recommended for preservation. The final word trailed off unfinished, as though the archivist had paused mid-thought and never returned to complete the sentence. The ink dried into a darker tone there, leaving the suggestion of hesitation or perhaps contentment in incompletion. Beside the entry sat a quill wrapped in twine, its tip faintly stained blue. It looked as if it had once been dipped into night sky itself. The scent of the ink bottle next to it was subtle and cool, a mix of iron gall and violet, the kind that leaves a shadow even after the words fade. The room itself seemed made of such shadows, gentle ones, not ominous, the kind that soften light rather than swallow it. The wooden floor shone faintly under the lamp, the corners dark but tender. Everything here was in its place, yet the atmosphere invited touch, the grain of the wood, the curve of the pen, the smooth spine of the ledger. It was a space built for the ritual of care. In the far corner of the table, under a thin sheet of glass, was a single page displayed like a relic. Its edges were torn, its text written in uneven, hurried strokes. Yet the handwriting carried grace even in imperfection. It read, "If you are reading this, you have already entered the place where time rests. Do not search for beginnings or endings here. All that is kept in kindness." The words were simple, but they carried a warmth that lingered. Beneath them, faint indentations from the original writer's hand could still be felt pressed into the page like soft echoes. The archivist's lamp flickered once briefly, and a faint shadow rippled across the desk. The flame recovered quickly, steadying again into its golden hue. But for that instant, the entire room seemed to breathe the papers, the ink, the air itself, as though something invisible had passed through, gently acknowledging its own story. Beyond the table, against the opposite wall, stood tall cabinets of glass and wood. Inside were more volumes arranged by color rather than title shades of parchment, ochre, soft gray, deep indigo. The effect was painterly like clouds, layered across an old horizon. A ladder rested against one cabinet, its rungs smooth and its brass wheels locked into the grooves of the floor. The ladder's faint creak as it settled into stillness was the only sound besides the rain. And in that moment, everything aligned the rhythm of the water outside the golden pulse of the lamp, the scent of ink and lavender wax, the faint whisper of paper breathing. The archivist's table was not just a place of work. It was an altar to gentleness, to the act of preserving without possession of touching the past, without demanding it to speak. It represented what the library itself seemed to teach, that quiet care is its own kind of creation. The rain outside continued to murmur. The flame leaned slightly to one side, drawing its light across the neat stacks of paper. In the glow, the ink shimmered faintly blue-violet, almost black. And for a moment, it looked like constellations scattered across a map of night. Time, as always, here moved without moving. The archivist's table waited patient, eternal, holding its unfinished thoughts like blessings. And the rain, faithful as ever, kept writing its own endless entry upon the window pane. As the night grew deeper, the rain thinned to a delicate hush. Its rhythm softened into the faintest of murmurs, no longer falling in earnest, but brushing the world with quiet fingertips. The library, bathed in this stillness, felt more awake than asleep. Every lamp burned low and steady. Every shadow had lengthened into repose. And through the tall arched windows, the moon had finally appeared, breaking free from its veil of drifting clouds. The moonlight entered gently, not as a flood, but as a slow bloom. It pooled between the shelves, pale and silver, and spread across the floor like water searching for quiet corners. Each polished surface, the edge of a chair, the glass on a framed illustration, the brass rim of the clock, caught the light in its own way, creating soft glimmers that moved as if alive. In this hour, the library seemed to breathe differently. Its silence was no longer the silence of day's end, but the silence of something eternal, a kind of awareness. The scent of rain still lingered, mingling now with the faint sweetness of candle smoke. The air carried traces of lavender paper and the cool mineral breath of the outside world. Between the shelves, dust motes drifted upward in slow spiral motions. They shimmered in the moonlight like small planets suspended in orbit. If one were to watch long enough, they would seem to rise and fall with the same rhythm as breathing the building's own respiration, vast and serene. Far down one corridor, where the shelves narrowed and converged, a skylight stretched overhead. The moon sat squarely within its frame, a pale coin against the ink-blue sky. Clouds passed across it now and then, veiling its glow and revealing it again in a cadence so smooth It seemed deliberate. The library moved with this rhythm, light, shadow, light again, a quiet heartbeat measured by the moon. Below the skylight, a long table waited bare except for one open book. Its pages glowed with the moon's reflection, almost translucent. The ink upon them gleamed faintly blue, and though the text was too small to read, its presence was enough. There was a calm dignity in that book's solitude, as if it had been left open not to be read, but to let the moon see itself. Around the table, the shelves rose like cathedral walls, their uppermost edges lost in shadow. The bindings closest to the light shone faintly silver. Those deeper within gleamed with copper tones, the lamplight catching their gilt lettering. The result was a gentle spectrum of warmth and coolness, the golden glow of memory and the silver sheen of dream. Together, they held the space in perfect balance. The floor beneath was covered in a thin layer of light and shadow, dappling in slow motion as the clouds shifted. Sometimes the moonlight pooled perfectly, illuminating the spines of books in a brief, silent row. Other times, it withdrew, leaving the shelves cloaked in soft dusk again. This ebb and flow felt like conversation, moon and library wordless, familiar. Along one wall, a small ladder rested its wooden rungs, still faintly warm from the evening's earlier hours. It leaned casually, as though someone had just descended. The faint scent of old polish clung to it, beeswax, oak, and dust. Nearby, a single feather, perhaps from a quill, had fallen onto the floor. It shone softly where the moonlight touched it, its edges trembling in a breath of air, too subtle to hear. The silence in this part of the library was not empty. It was rich layered, textured, the kind that feels full rather than void. Somewhere in that vast stillness, a clock ticked faintly, its pendulum marking moments with almost inaudible patience. The sound traveled through the air like a pulse, unhurried, reminding the world that even stillness has rhythm. From one of the higher shelves, a thread of silver caught the light. A thin ribbon used as a bookmark, its end dangling slightly in the air. The ribbon swayed gently, as if stirred by the same breath that moved the feather below. It reflected the moonlight so perfectly. It looked alive, glimmering like a fragment of the night sky itself. In the center aisle, a patch of floorboards gleamed brighter than the rest, where the roof allowed a thin column of light to fall uninterrupted. That light revealed faint marks etched into the wood initials, perhaps carved long ago and worn almost invisible. They told no story that could be read yet. Their presence spoke of someone who once stood here in this same pool of moonlight and wanted to leave a trace behind. It was the library's way. It did not erase, only softened. Over time, even memories became part of its design. As the night reached its quietest point, the air seemed to grow thicker with light. Every sound, the rain, the ticking clock, the faint creak of settling shells folded into one long continuous breath. Even the shadows had softened their edges, melting into one another. The moon had turned the library into a single luminous bodywood paper glass air, all fused into one tranquil being. Near the far wall, a statue stood, a figure, cloaked and seated, carved in marble long ago. Its surface was smooth and pale, and the moonlight gathered on its shoulders like silk. The expression was peaceful. Eyes half closed, lips turned faintly upward in thought. A single line of verse was etched into the base. The stories sleep, but never end. The light traced each word, filling the grooves of the letters with silver. It was as if the moon itself was reading. The room exhaled again, so quietly that even the air barely stirred. A tiny breeze passed through the upper vents, moving the dust in slow currents, carrying with it the faint scent of rain fading into dawn. Beyond the skylight, the clouds began to thin, revealing the first hint of morning blue. It was not sunrise yet, only the whisper of its promise. The moonlight still ruled, but it grew gentler, more translucent, preparing to yield. For a brief moment, everything inside and outside aligned: the shelves, the books, the windows, the moon, the world. The entire library seemed to float suspended in light. In that weightless stillness, something stirred, not in the air, but in the heart of the moment itself. The sense that all stories, all voices, all whispers that had ever lived here were softly awake beneath the silence. They did not speak, for they did not need to. They simply existed, luminous and eternal, waiting to be dreamt again. The moon lowered itself slightly, slipping closer to the horizon. Its glow dimmed the shelves, receded into shadow, and the silver path across the floor began to fade. The last fragments of moonlight lingered a while longer on the feather the ribbon. The open page then dissolved into darkness. The night held its breath, caught between what was fading and what was to come. And in that breath, brief, sacred, timeless, the library was infinite. Dawn was still far away. The moon had drifted past the skylight, and the rain, having sung all night, had fallen into silence. The world outside the library now glistened beneath a thin sheen of mist. Within these ancient walls, the air was velvet heavy with stillness, cool as the hour before first light. Every lamp had burned down to its final glow, leaving the building haloed in the tender blue of the in-between. This was the library's favorite hour, the one when it could rest. The pages, the shelves, the beams and brass, the parchment and ink, all exhaled together in quiet relief. The night had been long, but it had been gentle. It had done what it was meant to do: cradle the forgotten tales in warmth and let them sleep again. In the main hall, the air shimmered faintly with the residue of moonlight. The great windows were fogged with condensation, each pane carrying delicate tracings of water that caught the dim light like silver lace. The faint scent of the rain still lingered, mingled now with beeswax cedar and the last curl of smoke from the dying fire. The chairs near the hearth sat untouched, yet not lonely, their cushions still shaped by the invisible presence of those who had lingered in memory alone. The teapot on the tray, long emptied, had gathered a thin layer of condensation along its porcelain lip. A blanket lay folded neatly over one arm of the sofa, its fibers lit by the faint glow of the embers. A low crack sounded from the fireplace, a final sigh from the wood before the ash turned to quiet gray. The sound was soft, but in the silence of the room, it echoed like a heartbeat slowing toward rest. Somewhere deeper in the building, a door eased itself shut. Another responded with a faint click. It was as if the library itself was rearranging its breathing, gathering its walls closer, drawing the hush around itself like a cloak. The rain had washed the world clean, and now the air felt weightless, scented faintly with wet stone and earth. Through a high circular window, the clouds had begun to thin, revealing the palest trace of dawn's approach, not yet light, but a suggestion of it, a bluer blue waiting to open. Down the long aisles, the spines of books shimmered in that half-light, their titles unreadable, their presence serene. They no longer asked to be known. They simply were. Their stillness had become part of the atmosphere, the way ocean air carries salt without effort. The shelves themselves seemed to lean inward, a cathedral of wood and whispering dust sheltering the stories that slept within. And in their sleep, they were radiant, not with color or sound, but with a feeling that can only be described as peace made visible. At the far end of the hall, beneath the great window, stood the same chair that had waited since the evening began. The one by the rainlit pane with its lavender wool blanket and view of the garden beyond. It was different now. The candle on the sill had burned down completely, leaving only a puddle of wax, pale and soft as milk. The wick, curled in upon itself, no longer glowed. Yet the light that replaced it was purer, that faint pre-dawn silver that hovers before the world awakens. It poured through the glass in soft streams, illuminating the grains of dust that hung like stars. The chair's outline glowed gentle and content, its wooden arms catching the first shimmer of morning. A single page lay on the floor beneath the window, likely fallen from some volume during the night's quiet shifting of air. Its edges fluttered slightly in the faint draft. The text upon it, though faded, could still be read if one leaned close. Every story once told becomes part of the silence that follows. And in that silence, it learns to dream again. The ink shimmered faintly as though the letters themselves exhaled light. Then the page stilled perfectly still. In the distance, through the cracked window panes, the world began to stir. The faintest song of morning birds trembled somewhere far beyond the courtyard. A soft trill, tentative and sweet. The sound drifted through the rain-scented air, brushing the silence like fingers on a harp. It did not disturb the peace. It joined it. The library listened. Its walls absorbed the sound with gratitude, as if welcoming an old friend back after a long, restful night. The echo of the bird song mingled with the faint hum of the building's heartbeat wood, expanding, air shifting, glass sighing. For the first time in hours, light began to move across the shelves again, slow and golden. It touched the tops of books, slid down spines, and gathered in corners. The library woke gently, but it did not hurry. Its awakening was the kind that happens not from sleep, but from dream. If one could stand at the center of it all, one might feel a soft vibration, not of sound, but of life itself. The knowledge resting inside these walls did not speak in words. It breathed in rhythm, with the world rising, with the rain falling, with the hush existing beyond time. Every book, every parchment, every fragile petal pressed between pages carried the same quiet truth, that nothing ever truly ends. It only changes form. The forgotten tales were never gone, only waiting. And in their waiting, they became peace itself. As dawn neared, the mist outside the windows lifted. The sky turned to pearl. Light flowed through the glass, filling the hall with a brilliance too soft to wake anyone, yet bright enough to touch everything. The shadows withdrew like tide water leaving the wood, and paper bathed in serenity. The great library, now luminous and silent, seemed to smile a slow, unseen smile made of dust motes and drifting air. The last sound was a breath, perhaps the building's own, or perhaps the echo of a dream passing through. The light trembled once more upon the pages and then settled into stillness. The rain had ended. The night was complete, and in that gentle hour before morning fully bloomed, the library rested in perfect quiet, a vessel of stories, memories, and peace, holding within it the calm heartbeat of eternity. All tales forgotten, all whispers asleep, all hearts at rest. The air shimmered softly one last time. Then everything everywhere grew still. Sleep well, dream softly, and may the night hold you kindly.